It's Scale School time, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, students from around the world. Oh, it rhymed. I'm a poet and I didn't know it. Welcome to a special edition of Scale School. We're going to be doing a couple of episodes over the next few weeks, diving deep into what exactly is programmable privacy. How does it work? What is it for? And how can it be used to make a better blockchain experience for users and developers alike? As always, with me today, my special guest, the teacher, the man, the myth, the savior of Star City. Nope, the other one, Mr. Soy Cutler. It was a Green Arrow reference.
I like it. Sorry. I literally just realized as soon as you started it, I walked away 5 minutes ago to go make a cup of coffee. And my cup of coffee is 10 feet away, sitting under the coffee maker. I'm very sad. That'd be so rude to our students.
Go get it.
Okay, fine. This is like when you leave the classroom and you're like, there's like spitballs flying. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
This is critical because today we are going back to education. I want to apologize to everyone. It's my fault. We've gone down a tangent the last 2 months. We've had some amazing guests on, no questions asked. We went down a tangent where I did a little bit less speaking and teaching and a little bit more just rambling ideation. And so it's my bad. We're gonna get back to the basics here, like Mr. Falcor says.
Yeah.
So yeah, but and I'm fired up. I've been doing some really cool stuff with programmable privacy, and I'm excited to share.
100%. And I think it's important for people that are kind of new to Scale School, but are new to Scale as well. This idea and kind of mechanism, which is programmable privacy, is something new, right? And a lot of people might not know exactly what. Well, we've said it already probably 5 or 6 times. What programmable privacy is. So, Sawyer, what is programmable privacy?
Yeah, for sure. So programmable privacy functionally is a set of primitives that you can build with that enable you to have compliant and easy to use private capabilities, right, within an existing system. And that's very abstract. And so I'm going to use an analogy that a lot of people probably will know to make that a little bit more clear. Programmable money. If you've heard of programmable money, that's what we tend to believe, stable coins and cryptocurrency is programmable money, right? It's money that we can essentially use within code, where the code functionally is law, not from a legal perspective, but from however the code works, that's how the money functionally moves. And we're able to essentially make all of that money move in a programmatic way, right? We can use code to define what happens. And so programmable privacy is essentially our kind of next step there, where we take the programmable money and we take, blockchain compute, and we add privacy primitives to it that you can now essentially stack together in a very composable manner and build applications directly on the EVM, directly on a blockchain that historically were either impossible or incompliant. And so, yeah, that's kind of the intro to programmable privacy.
And, looking at those kind of, you mentioned compliance, you mentioned a few items here, right? Like, what is if you were to look at the umbrella of programmable privacy, what are those kind of main pillars that go into it?
Yeah, so I think there's, a few different things, right? I think the, kind of first pillar here is the ability to have composability, right, within software. So what I mean by that is when you think about building a system, right, you don't necessarily need everything all the time, right? And in some cases, you want to be in some cases, compliance is really critical, right? Like when we're doing programmable money, right? We want that to be compliant. In other cases, we're just doing, a fun little poker game. And we don't really care so much about compliance. We're more so just trying to hide data, right? So that compliance piece is, or composability is really critical. The second part is the compliance, right? So being able to actually take those components and have the ability to take what you're already doing in, you know, my business is moving money and I want to do that privately on chain so I can tap into, the speed and the cost effectiveness. I can't necessarily just sacrifice I can't sacrifice my compliance, right? I
Mm.
work hard to get all the licensing and run the correct type of business, and I can't sacrifice that. And then, the last part there is I think the usability of it. So this is critical toward when we think about actually building with these things, right? So many of these privacy protocols are either just pure tokens, right? Or they are, basically like a net new language, right? Like I have to go out and learn a whole new thing. And so half the battle, as we've learned over the years, is developers kind of converge onto specific technologies, right? And we've seen this with Solidity. Developers tend to prefer Solidity in many cases over Rust because it's just a lot easier to read. Now, AI may change that significantly. There is a big push for Rust right now in the agentic building world. However, being able to easily write this without having to go relearn a whole new stack, is critical. And so, yeah, I think those are kind of the big ones, right? What do you
Yeah,
think?
and I,
You
I
agree?
think, yeah, no, 100%. I think like for me, kind of some of the most interesting kind of things is, you know, I think the compliance angle is very, very important, especially when we're talking about on-chain money, on-chain payroll, things like that. And while there are, chains and things out there that allow you to do, one of the four things, let's just say hypothetically, right? The fact of the matter is, without all of these things, they're almost kind of pointless, right? You wouldn't be able to do on-chain payroll on a blockchain that has, let's just say hypothetically, only had private transactions or private money, because you need the compliance angle, right? You need auditors to be able to come in, take a look, legal entities, IRS, whomever, right? Need to be able to access that information. And if they don't have access to it, guess what? You're in a lot of trouble. So
Yep.
the thing that I really appreciate with programmable privacy is the fact that one hand feeds another, right? Without one, you can't really fully utilize the other aspects. Whilst, with programmable privacy, you can do on-chain payroll and these other things.
Totally. I feel like that's kind of why, like, I use that word composable a lot when talking about this, because I think it portrays itself here in two ways. The first is quite literally, I look at these like building blocks, and we'll kind of dive into what those building blocks are. But it also is, to your point, it is composable with the rest of your business, right? And when we're thinking about how to take, essentially, how to move money and move value, right? And it's not just about sending a stable coin from A to B. This could
Yep.
be, this could be stocks. This can be RWAs, right? It can represent titles and ownership of information. All of this, it portrays value, right? It represents value,
Yep.
and being able to showcase who owns the value, how the value's been transferred, but do it at the speed of a blockchain, which we know is incredible, without sacrificing, to what you said, the access to that information in a secure and compliant manner is critical. And that's something that I think the blockchain industry is seeing a significant shift in. I think if we were having this conversation 2, 3 years ago, we probably would just be getting screamed at like, that's not blockchain, just like hardcore decentralization and
Yeah.
hardcore privacy protocols.
Yeah.
And I think with the growth of compliant stablecoins and the demand for regulation, we're seeing this shift where there's still people and blockchains and teams, going down this more, cypherpunk vision. And that's great. I personally believe that if you're not harming others, you should have the freedom to explore that. But we also know that from a day-to-day and an industry perspective, enterprises and big businesses want to explore and adopt this technology. We're seeing, NASDAQ and stuff explore tokenization. We're seeing these huge shifts, but the reality is they're primarily all looking at their own private options right now because they can't put it on a public blockchain. And so that composability with the EVM, I think, is just so critical and an unlock that really hasn't been probably comprehended at the industry level yet.
Because that's what it does. It does open up so many, new doors, right? To your point, NASDAQ were looking at 24/7 stocks and shares, right? Wanting to do it on the blockchain, they're considering it, but you are going to run into that issue where, it is all going to be public, and that might not, who knows, might not necessarily be the best of things. So
it definitely will not all be public. I can pretty much guarantee you that. There's that is the point in itself. Is I think I think this is probably actually a good point to just call out. It's kind of like, I guess, gas, right, in a sense. So we spent a long time trying to educate this concept of zero gas because our belief was that the compute is the byproduct of the product, essentially, right? So what that means is you shouldn't, as a user, have to think about gas. As a developer, it's okay to think about things in terms of compute, right? I need to buy gas or I need to buy compute credits because you're paying for a constrained resource, or at least what was a constrained resource. Obviously, block space is now abundant. But we finally gotten to a point as an industry where gas abstraction and even wallet abstraction is the new normal. Everyone is either going with account abstraction or some form of gas abstraction. A lot of chains are even now thinking about doing, zero gas opportunities.
Yep.
And that's great because that's what we always believed in. But I think privacy actually follows a very similar path where it's not an afterthought. And we actually talked about this, you and I, we had a very similar conversation, I think 3 or 4 months ago, maybe, where I actually said this exact thing where privacy is one of those things that is hot and cold in the blockchain industry, at least, where everyone knows they need it all the time, but it's this hot and cold narrative where it comes in, people get really excited, everyone makes announcements, and then very few teams deliver. And then it just kind of is that, cycle. Yeah. And I think that for blockchain to truly have a place in where the world is going, privacy is not a negotiable item anymore. Every application should have elements of privacy, and the level of that is very dependent, right? The level of, Scale's BLS threshold encrypted, which is multi-party encryption cryptography, is not worse than ZK or FHE. It's just different, right? It's just a different level of who has access to information and why. And so I think that is in itself critical because if we can make these things easy to use, it now becomes a new normal. And as it becomes a new normal, we see the opportunity for businesses building with these primitives to actually succeed and be able to compete head to head with, traditional companies.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing that it opens up, right? It's like no one's going to move away from what already works and what's been the standard for the past 30, 40 years, right? Until there is a mechanism that is not only 5%, 10%, 20%, 30% better, but 100, 200% better, because cost and time for switching and moving is exponential, right? And, we've seen some companies out there like, Amex has done that agent toolkit I believe Visa or MasterCard has also done something similar. We're starting to see the shift, right? To AI agents specifically. But kind of this idea of on-chain money and, institutions bringing their businesses on-chain, it's still early days. And that is because no one has gone out there and put together a be all and end all encompassing package that they can go in there, it's plug and play, and they can get the benefits of things that were before impossible to even think of, but are now possible. And what I like so much about programmable privacy and kind of, what we're doing with scale on base and things like that is we're not gatekeeping it. If you want to use it and you want to do it, come and do it. And I think that's something that's really, really interesting. And we've seen some amazing builders come out already, bringing forward these new ideas, new applications. Hatcher Labs have been doing some really, really cool stuff. And we're going to just continue to see the evolution of businesses on chain as time goes on.
Yeah.
But I do also think it's really important for us to just kind of go through why would a business, let's just say hypothetically, let's say, trying to think, let's go back to the NASDAQ, right? Because that's a company that, everyone knows. Why would they come on chain?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's for the exact, it's the exact reason functionally they're looking at tokenization and moving toward that is again, it's kind of this like weird, it's the code is law concept, in my opinion. So what blockchains do really well, or at least what a virtual machine that is designed to be immutable and essentially forward-only execution, right? And what I mean by that is it's you can kind of think of it like this will be a semi-technical term, but you can kind of think of it like what we call a finite state machine. Mm-hmm. So at any given point in time, there's really like a binary. There's a binary status for how the blockchain is, which is it's either down or it's running. Yeah. There really is no, in most cases, it's very rare to have an unknown in the blockchain. Just due to the design of the EVM, when you're building a traditional backend server, there's so many weird edge cases, things break, they stall, they get stuck. And if you kind of look at a blockchain, it's just a lot. I'm not saying there aren't edge cases and weird nuances and bugs, but it's just from an execution perspective, the execution tends to be a lot more clear cut because of the way the bytecode is executed. It's just it feels like over time building smart contracts is very easy because the design of the system enforces the fact that it really can't break out of this loop. And so that is kind of part one. Part two is the composability. And this gets really interesting, but I think as you think about why blockchain and what people want to do, and the answer is you want, ideally at the end of the day, you want to capture as much value as possible when you're building these types of products, right? Yeah. They want all the trading volume. They want all the stocks. They want everyone to want to be there. And so I think what's really cool is blockchain also opens up the door for composability at the business level, right? Today, it's not really such an easy thing to build on top of the NASDAQ, right? But if you think about it from a blockchain perspective, let's say they, were on a chain that was maybe semi-public or, their own chain, but they had some open opportunities. It's not unfeasible to imagine a world in, 3 or 5 years where developers could actually build applications running on the NASDAQ, but it's, you don't have to necessarily go through this like complex API onboarding process and you're, severely limited. So I think that's always kind of a dream, but it's part of it. The most relevant thing is value representation and movement and speed. So the reality is that blockchains are not actually faster by default. They're all just systems. And you can make the systems as fast or slow as you want by pulling different levers and optimizing and changing different things, right? This is why, scales very fast. Solana functionally is faster, right? From a pure block time perspective in most cases.
Yeah.
And it's why, we have Lighter and Hyperliquid and all these other, trading blockchains that are even faster, right? These are sub 200 milliseconds, sub 50 millisecond, and they're designed to be trading engines. These are just levers all these different companies and blockchains pull to structure something in some way. And what I think is really interesting about the always on tokenization is there's clearly something which I probably don't know enough about related to whatever happens at the end of the day that they believe putting assets on a blockchain and tokenizing them, or at least just the tokenization part, starts to solve, right? Maybe it's the settlement, maybe it's netting between different assets, maybe it's guarantees of liquidity or margin collateral. I have no idea. If anyone from the NASDAQ ever listens to this or some other exchange, please reach out because I'd love to chat. But I do think there's the question mark of why. I do actually think there's a paper that I need to read on that. I think they put out some sort of like paper or blog or something.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I'll go try to find it. But long story short is it's just a different type of system design. And again, the really cool part, if you ultimately think about a blockchain, which is probably even more relevant than the speed, is just the atomic guarantee. If you build a blockchain with instant finality, like we have, like Tempo has, there is no risk of change. Once a trade is settled, the trade is settled.
Yeah.
And so I think a big part as well from that perspective is the atomic guarantee for me.
Yeah.
Because when you are building a giant distributed trading system, my experience is that race conditions and how you handle many different things trying to happen at the same time is very complicated. And blockchains, one of the things they've solved just in their own way is this distributed systems coming to consensus, right? If you now have all of these operators, whether they're all run by NASDAQ in different parts of the country, different parts of the world, or whether they're run by different partners of the NASDAQ, it doesn't matter which node or operator your transaction gets forwarded to. The way blockchains are designed, you have this atomic guarantee around my trade is going to settle in the right order. Ideally without, MEV manipulation, things like that, which is part of what we solve as well. But I do think that's also just a big part of it is how do you guarantee that as you grow? Considering there's, from my understanding, they tend to move that order flow around to different places for.
Yeah, it's a great point. I hadn't actually even considered that. I remember, how many months ago was it? Maybe 2-3 months ago, or 4 months ago, give or take, Solana had the rollback, didn't they? You wouldn't be able to have NASDAQ.
When did Solana have a rollback?
It might have been a couple years ago, actually. I don't know.
I don't think Solana's ever had a rollback.
Is it not? I swear it had a rollback. No?
I don't think so. They've had issues where transactions drop just due to valid network congestion.
Yeah.
But it's actually one of the nuances of blockchain. Just to make sure we're not spreading misinformation. A rollback requires the entire chain and all the validators to essentially agree to go back in time.
Yeah.
And it's very, very rare. I actually think the last chain to do a rollback was I don't want to misspeak because I don't want to.
It was not last hack. It was the hack before.
No, it wasn't Solana. It was an L2.
No. Yeah, I was agreeing with you. It was, it was.
But anyways, rollbacks are very rare, which is kind of an interesting thing because it's always been one of our primary arguments against why traditional L2s struggle is because the true time to finality. But it actually is one of those things where over, the last 5, 6 years, um, rollbacks are very rare. However, when they do occur, they can be obviously, very painful to those impacted. But yeah, I'm not aware of Solana having any rollbacks. I do know they've had a lot of congestion issues.
Yeah,
But I mean,
that might be what I'm thinking of. It might be the congestion, but to the point, right? With congestion and things like that, someone like the Nasdaq wouldn't be able to tolerate something like that, right? So my question to you, Mr. Sir Cutler, would be with private companies coming on board. Do you think the differentiation between them actually coming into blockchain versus them staying out would be their own dedicated chain?
yes, 100%. You
Yeah.
can't give up control. And I think the dream of, again, the dream of the global decentralized, blockchain is not dead, but it is.
Unrealistic.
No, I think it's more like, I would consider it to be more of your like starter versus enterprise. So
Mm.
I think if you look at, AWS or, Railway, Render, DigitalOcean, Google, Azure, right? You've got all these companies that sell compute.
Yeah.
And in all these companies, they tend to have, these starting tiers that are cheaper, and they run on shared infrastructure,
Mm.
right? And I think for, um, a lot of those, it's for a lot of companies, right? It's the right place to start because you don't necessarily need these like all these guarantees and whatever to start your business.
Yeah.
Now you get to a point where whether it's for growth, privacy, compliance, whatever, you now need to start to spin up your own dedicated, virtual private servers, your own private compute.
Mm.
And that's when you start to get to this, mid-market enterprise level. And I kind of look at the majority of blockchain in the same way. I think and there's no reason, and I can't think of a good one why majority of enterprises would want to go on a public blockchain as default,
Mm.
especially when they're the issuer or the maintainer of the asset, because they can't essentially give that away,
Yeah.
right? So, for example, if I own assets, right, and my brokerage firm is holding those, and my brokerage firm is, that stock is on the Nasdaq, I can't just like, I don't want them to just be like, okay, hey, we're moving this to, Ethereum, right? Like, because
Yeah.
now if something happens to Ethereum, my assets are at risk. And well, obviously, if there's insurance and stuff, then it's kind of whatever.
Mm.
But there's also no privacy there yet. So,
Yeah.
anyways, long story short, I don't really see a reason for a lot of people to just go directly to the public blockchain when they're already big enough and they're an enterprise company worth billions and billions and billions. I just don't really see the reality there. We are seeing we've seen BlackRock and Fidelity and I think a few others, right? They've launched funds as kind of more like asset classes on Ethereum and some other chains. And I just don't really think we've seen the adoption there. I just don't
Yeah.
think the interest is there, and it's very hard to get access to those. So again, I don't see that. I do think there is a valid world though, where you have this collection of public blockchains that are open and permissionless, where people get started and they're tapping into these private blockchains, right? So you've got the layer zeros, you've got the stablecoin issuers, you've got oh man, I'm blanking on names today. It's terrible. Who's the wormhole? There's another one that I'm Hyperlink. Sorry, right there. You've got all these kind of third-party bridges that offer, unique designs and cryptographic guarantees. And so my belief is ultimately you're going to have those entities connecting private to public blockchains. And I think that's ultimately where the world goes, because that is functionally how systems work today. Is you have systems connect to systems via OAuth or OIDC, or API keys, bearer credentials, whatever it may be. And yeah, that like I just don't really see a world where that doesn't happen. And so I think when that does start to happen, you now have this question of where do those chains go?
Yeah.
And I really do believe, there will be, uh, I think there will be a lot of entities spinning up their own private blockchains that they want to tap into a public network at some point.
No, I like it. I like it a lot. It's yeah, I completely agree. And I think what we're going to be able to do and what we're going to be able to see is kind of like a new evolution, right? So, what do you think would be some of the new kind of or old, give me your top 3 products that are going to come on that could come on chain with the use of the likes of programmable privacy.
Yeah. I mean, I think the primary one is I think we'll see more trading functions come on chain,
Mm.
but more just more capable, more agent focused, and more composable. I've been doing, a good amount of thought into this as I've been experimenting with programmable privacy myself. And one of the things that I found is when you can embed strategy, it's not hard to create logic, right? It's never been hard to create logic. It's hard to secure logic, but it's always been hard to protect strategy. And so what gets really exciting when you start to think about these features is there's so many things that people use, right? Whether they're personal traders or they're trading firms. These are things like time weighted average, right? TWAPs, limit orders. They use spot to hedge leverage and vice versa. And they have for when they're using margin, there's potentially auto close and essentially like handling that collateral for you.
Yep.
There is the ability to do like ladder orders, like chain orders. There's just so many financial primitives that functionally exist that get used every day that the average trader doesn't know about or doesn't have access to.
Yeah.
And we started saying this about maybe a year ago, maybe we're coming up on a year, which is that blockchains are more intuitive for agents than they'll ever be for humans.
Yes.
Because blockchains don't care whether it's bytecode or not. They can comprehend that significantly faster than we can.
Yeah.
And so now that we can put this strategy on chain, now that I can compose these protocols together, I can now do something where I literally have, let's say I've got, I want to create a TWAP for a prediction market, right? So let's say the NHL and NBA playoffs are happening right now, right? And let's say I'm using the prediction markets for sports predictions, and I want to do every day or every 10 minutes, right? I want to buy into some position,
Yeah.
right? You can't really do that easily today, not on chain, because Polymarket and Kalshi are both technically not on chain.
Yeah.
Polymarket has elements on chain, but their actual trading order book is off chain. And so if you recreated, an on chain prediction market, which there are people who have done it, they just haven't really gotten traction.
Yeah.
You can now compose those together. So anyways, trading primitives, I think is just going to be, I think there's such an opportunity to break out of this just basic. We have an AMM, we have lending, we have perps, and we have, 3 big prediction markets or 2 big prediction markets. I think there's just such a huge opportunity to kind of recreate that for a world where people no longer say what position they want. They just tell their agent, hey, I want to get more exposure to this. And then it goes and figures it out. And yeah, I just think there's a lot of opportunity there. Second is definitely the prediction market. I really do believe I think someone will create an on-chain private prediction market that actually is composable with these other protocols. Right now, you can really only market make on-chain. And so I'll be curious to see if that winds up happening. And then lastly, I think is going to be I kind of bucket for context, I bucket RWAs and pretty much like value transfer stablecoins all into kind of like financial primitives. So that first one, that's everything, right? Stablecoin transfers, all that stuff. I think the last one is actually more of a blue sky outlook on the world. And it's as artificial intelligence continues to grow and people have the ability to be more creative, I think there's, you see this change where people want to create, right? Everyone wants, almost everyone has something creative they want to try. Not everyone is willing to go out and try it. People that are, right, constantly creating. And so I actually think the combination of social, gaming, right, creating art, like I think there's actually a pretty big opportunity there, because in a world where intelligence becomes more and more commoditized from AI, I think personal, how people feel becomes more valuable. And I think the opportunity to create that and share that and sell that, or, chat and move that privately, becomes really interesting. And ultimately, I do think, human beings tend to be capitalistic by nature. And so that's why I think the
How
blockchain
dare
always,
you?
I mean, it's that
Hey,
not everyone, but like, you know what I mean? So I think it's
no, I get you.
right. I think that's where, the financial aspect always it feels like it comes in. And so I think for anything that's kind of net new, right? Imagine a world where people are creating art and they can actually, sell the art easily. That's not really, from my knowledge, is not really an easy thing today to do. And I'm not saying the NFT boom's coming back, but I think, just the ability to share this information privately and, kind of create cool things is, I think the creativity side of humanity will see a surge. And I think there will be things we haven't even thought of yet that get kind of created here.
No, I get you. I get you. Yeah, I agree. There's definitely, the lots of new opportunities and lots of new exciting things, man. It's going to be fun. It's going to be a great kind of a new era, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and, I think I think we should probably, unless you disagree here, I think it's probably important to maybe give an intro to um, each of these features. We're going to do a deep dive next week.
Yeah. Let's do a brief
But
little intro into them.
yeah, I think it's really interesting because the capabilities of these features get better as you stack them together. And I think that's really cool. So we've kind of, I won't say rebranded, but we've kind of repositioned some of the naming here just a tiny bit, over the last few months to try to make them easier, for developers and non-developers to kind of get a handle on. And so right now, we have basically three really core primitives, and then the fourth is also a primitive, but it's kind of a product that wraps the other three. And so we kind of look at them as the four features. And these are: one, encrypted transactions; two, conditional transactions; three, re-encryption; and four, confidential tokens. And so all of those are still pretty technical terms. And so we're going to dive into each of those really briefly. And then, I don't know, maybe we'll chat about blue sky, what we think each of these is good for. So encrypted transactions is the first privacy feature that we launched at SKALE. And that is the ability to make a transaction private from the time it leaves a wallet to the time it is executed on the EVM. And so what that means is, in very basic terms, if I want to make a trade and I do it on a traditional public blockchain, my order flow or my order is probably being sold or manipulated in some way, even if it's tiny, and I'm probably getting a worse rate because of that. This means that there's no value to trying to reorder the transaction because the validators quite literally cannot see what is in it. The only way they can do that is by all agreeing and coming to consensus. And that doesn't happen until after they've come to consensus. So they essentially can't bypass that. The second is conditional transactions. Now, conditional transactions builds on top of the encryption, the encrypted transaction. So you use an encrypted transaction generally to send the encrypted transaction. You don't have to, but it's recommended. Now, conditional transaction is really cool because when we first came up with this concept, essentially the idea was we could create a trigger, right? So, for example, what's the one that you always use, Mr. Falcor? If a government official tweets something on social media, and there's a sentiment that changes, I could use an oracle to push sentiment data to my contract, and based on the sentiment data, I want to do some action. Now, what's really cool is the sentiment in itself, as it gets pushed to the contract, can remain private until after execution, because that's the value of the first step, the encrypted transaction. But even cooler, the actual what we're executing is fully private and stored on chain. So we actually encrypt that using the blockchain's shared public key, and we can dive into that if we want to, but I think we'll probably dive into that deeper next week. Yeah. And essentially what happens then is that, hey, I want to go, place a trade to buy, I don't know, I want to buy Bitcoin or some stock, or I want to sell or do something. When that trigger occurs, that remains private again until after execution, because it's actually happening in the next block. Again, we'll dive deeper into that later next week. But it starts to allow for these composable conditions, which is really cool because that is your limit orders. That is your ability to say, if this, then do that in a private manner. That's essentially your ability to embed strategy on chain, right? And it's in most layman's terms.
Yeah.
Now, what's really cool about this, and something that we kind of stumbled onto accidentally a few weeks ago, is that you can also chain these conditional transactions together to create a loop. And so if you imagine, yeah, I know this gets really fun. I haven't really talked about this publicly yet, so this is going to be cool. So if you imagine, let's use a financial primitive. Let's use an ETF, for example. In an ETF, the most, at least from my knowledge, the most successful ETFs tend to be passively managed. And so what that means is they have a bucket of assets that they essentially have percentage positions in, and they tend to do quarterly, semi-annual, or annual reorganization, right? So they kind of change it over time, right? The S&P 500 ETFs are probably the most well-known. Most of those tend to change quarterly from my comprehension. And so what that means is over the course of the month, right? Let's say let's say you want, NVIDIA weighted at 12%, right? Because, well, it's just a giant, right? Most valuable company in the world. Now, as all these other companies continue to grow in value, what happens is technically the value of your NVIDIA position, even if it's also going up, may reduce in relation to these other ones, right? And so if you want to try to maintain a perfect percentage, you would have to actively trade it. And that's not necessarily efficient for the sizes of these ETFs. And so an example of where you could use a recursive conditional transaction is to essentially do a live ETF. So you literally have the conditional transaction execute another one every single block. And so you can keep your positions perfectly, or at least as close as possible, because you're constantly just buying and selling to try to keep your percentage. Same thing with a TWAP, right? If you want a time-weighted average position of, you want whatever, doing that on chain is pretty much impossible because you have to execute those manually. But now what you can actually do is you can say every block you're going to check, and you're going to check every 10 seconds. And so you're executing 10 transactions for every actual trade, but it's automatically guaranteed because the blockchain is the one doing it.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think that's one of the coolest things because right now you have to essentially trust an off-chain service, and there are a bunch of these that do it. But it's also just really cool because now, again, that's a strategy you can give to your agent. Hey, go plan this, and then your agent just listens instead of your agent having to try to guarantee it, which could fail. So really cool stuff there. The third one is re-encryption, which is the ability to store private data directly on the blockchain, both for the validator set to manipulate and to share with an individual. So for example, actually, let's just go to the confidential token because it's the best example. We could use this to build a confidential token, right? Private money. So let's say I've got $10. Actually, I have N dollars. You guys can't see it because it's private. Sorry. And I, need to pay Ben. And so I pay Ben some Z amount of money. And now Ben says, okay, well, I need to show this to, my accountant, whatever. Ben can now actually take his balance and he can add his accountant as a viewer. So his accountant can now see his balance and his transaction history. That is how we use re-encryption at its finest, is we actually take existing data and we add a key to re-encrypt all the information behind it so that an individual can now access that data, which is pretty incredible because, again, it's just not something that's historically been easily done on a blockchain. So, and that leads us to our confidential token, which, like I said, is kind of a product / feature. Yeah, those are kind of our four, that's an intro to our 4 primitives. We're going to dive much deeper into those next week. Yeah, Ben, I guess any thoughts, questions, comments, concerns, confusion?
My life is confusion, my friend. You know this. No, listen,
Yes.
I think it was a good, good introductory. Obviously, we've got a lot to go through. We have a bunch of demos as well that we're going to be sharing with you guys. And yeah, we're super excited to kind of, dive deeper into what the hell programmable privacy is, how it works. Me and Sawyer, 1v1 poker. We're going to have a good time.
Yeah. I will not be playing poker. My agent will be playing poker.
Your agent will be playing poker.
My agent will be playing poker because my agent is better than I am at playing poker. So.
Oh, yeah. Nice.
Yeah. At least one of the personas is.
Amazing. All right. Well, hey, good introductory episode. Join us again next week as we dive into, what are we diving into? Composable privacy. Deep dive into composable privacy, how it works, what it is, what you can do with it, and why you should be really, really excited about what is going on over here at Scale. Anything else from you, Sawyer?
Just a call to action. If you're listening or you're a builder and you're interested in trying these, make sure to reach out to us. These primitives are available, right? You can build with them right now. There's some incredible opportunities. We've got other things coming. Things is a terrible word, but we got other things coming. So now's a great time to start building, because if you learn how to use this stuff now, you'll kind of have an edge on some other people. And if you already have an existing protocol, right? Your protocol could be on any chain, but if you have an existing protocol and you're trying to find that differentiation, come chat with us, right? Part of this is even just making existing protocols, 1% better. If we can help you, we want to. And so, don't be afraid to come chat with us, ask for help. We're happy to, help you figure out how you can best use these things. And come join us in the scale-based ecosystem.
100%. Thank you all so much for joining us, tuning in, and having a grand old time. I like these ones. These ones are nice and fun. They're nice and chill. And they're fun.
Yes.
I enjoy it. And we will see you again next week for our deep dive into programmable privacy. All right. Thank you for joining us. Goodbye.
All right, class, time to say goodbye. Let's erase the board.